Let's move on to the other rookie that got some significant playing time. Unfortunately, he did end the season tearing his ACL in Week 18. That's probably going to see him start the year on the PUP list this year, but it's Sidney Brown. Again, this is another guy that the Eagles were drafting, like they were catering to me last year. Sidney Brown was like number 64 on my big board. I loved the player in college, and man, I loved watching him in the NFL. He was learning on the fly last year. He only played 22% of his snaps deep in college. 57% were in the box, 21 in the slot. So he had a lot of versatility. And the Eagles used him in the slot a little bit last year. I mean, he was good against the run, really kind of struggled in coverage. They used him some at deep safety, and so he was learning a lot of different things. But we can throw up some stats for him here. He had a really high broken tackle and missed tackle percentage at 13.3%, which jives with his college film. He plays with his hair on fire, and he comes downhill looking to light you up. And a lot of times that results in some exciting plays, like when he was flexing over Terry McLaurin, I think it was in week 4. And it results in a fair share of missed tackles too. But in a defense last year that lacked so much speed and so much intensity, I think he quickly became somewhat of a fan favorite. And so I love Sidney Brown. I was devastated when he tore his ACL. You lose that whole first off season. You're going to be, missing out on reps in training camp and things like that. That's obviously going to make his career arc a little harder to get back onto the field. But Nick, as you look at Sidney Brown, what he did as a rookie, obviously the Eagles go and add Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They draft Cooper DeJean, who some have speculated could play some safety as well. How do you see Sidney Brown fitting into a rotation later this year once he's healthy and then moving forward with the team?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this whole DB room is going to be tough to figure out. I mean, it's not going to be until training camp where we really start to see where people fit in. And the thing is, if you look at ACL recoveries, it says the average is between 6 to 9 months. So he could be back around training camp, or he might not be back till October. It's going to be hard for a guy that, if he misses all of training camp, it's going to be hard for a guy at a position like safety, where so much about it is communication and making sure everyone else is correct and in the right spots. If he doesn't have any of that trust from Fangio because he hasn't been on the field to see it, he might be in a situation where he, again, is a sub-package player. I know a lot of people are thinking he's going to play over Reed. I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen this year. I think it might be a very similar thing of what we saw last year. But you touched on a lot of his traits. I mean, incredibly athletic. The guy looks like a Greek god. So maybe he comes back very early from his ACL injury. I mean, some guys just recover faster. But it's that attitude that he brings, what we needed last year and what we're going to need going forward again this year and years after. I'm extremely excited for the player that he can be. If there was a number of the plays, like in the Seahawks game, if he had made a couple of those plays, I bet we're talking about this guy completely different in terms of not the guy that's missing all these tackles, but this guy that's making big impact plays. He's like right there to making a lot of big impact plays. He just needs to finish it. And I'm not surprised with how he was used last year. I thought he was used how he should have been used because, like I was mentioning, there's just so much communication that goes on the back end. And you said he only played 22% of his snaps at deep safety. That's a different position than playing in the box or playing in the slot. And if going forward with this defense, I could see scenarios where he's like, if they want to play big nickel or big dime and against, 12 personnel or bigger personnel groupings, I think he might be a better fit than DeJean is at that role because he is just a bigger and even more physical player at that point in time. Now, I don't want to get into a thing where we're constantly rotating a bunch of players just based on are they in 12 personnel or are they in 11 personnel. You want to have some of that, continuity. But I thought he got a lot better as the year went along. I was pleasantly surprised at how good he was playing deep safety. There's a number of plays, like in the Cowboys game, he saved James Bradbury's ass by getting over top and preventing a wide open CeeDee Lamb touchdown. It's like, those are things that I love Reed Blankenship. I'm a Reed truther, but those are plays that Reed just probably isn't going to make just because he doesn't have that type of athleticism. His ceiling is really high, but it's really going to be about how does he take on to the nuances of playing deep safety, because there's a reason why a lot of slower players can succeed and be some of the best players at safety as opposed to other positions like corner. Like if you look at the all-pro players from 2022, Justin Simmons and Hufanga were both 4.6 players, But you know why they're so good? Because they can process so quickly and understand everything that's going on the field in front of them and get to the right spots. If Sidney figures that out, I mean, I think he has Pro Bowl level potential and potentially better than that.
All right. Eric, what are your thoughts on Sidney Brown, and do you perhaps have a nickname that you want to get out there for him?
Yeah, I coined him Crash Browndicoot because he is flying around the field. As Nick mentioned, he's often in right position. It was just probably just breaking down a little bit more conservatively to make the tackle because he was looking for the hit stick often. I do like him more in the box. Now, that's his pedigree. Like you mentioned, about going back to college, he played that a lot more. So could he develop into a deep safety starting caliber? Sure. Now, the thing I would highlight specifically about him is we've predicted that Fangio will use a lot of big dime and like big nickel packages because the strength and depth of the team looks like it's the secondary. So you want to get those guys on the field. And just for those who are unfamiliar, that's basically in the big dime, that's going to be 3 safeties with 3 corners, and then nickel's just 3 safeties with 2 corners. And that's going to put him in position to play closer to the line of scrimmage. He's can be a quasi linebacker in those situations. Now, we've heard in training camp from beat reporters that he's been like very involved in kind of those discussions with the safeties about like, you know, different coverage rules and checks, so much so that they specifically singled him out for making sure that he was like on his P's and Q's. So that's encouraging to me. I think he had the highest recorded GPS speed of like any defender the entire NFL last year. I didn't know he even had that long speed. So that kind of speaks to what Nick said about his potential. There's nothing really limiting him. He's very physical and he can be rangy and is instinctive. So if he just refines, you know, some of the little weaknesses he has, like over aggressiveness, understanding route combinations so that he can play the deep safety position more effectively, and just getting more experience in general there, I think he can be great. Although I think probably for the next year or two, to me, he's more of a sub-package player who's probably going to be in the 300 to 500 snap range.
Yeah, according to Next Gen Stats, on his interception return against the Cardinals, which let's not forget, the Eagles drafted him with the draft pick they were awarded for the Cardinals tampering with Jonathan Gannon. So the gift that keeps on giving. But he topped out at 21.52 miles per hour, which is faster than any Eagles ball carrier over the last 2 seasons. So he's got the speed. I do question, Jonny, he's basically the same height, the same weight, the same 40 time, the same play style as Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. How do those guys work together on the same field? Is there a role for them at the same time? Is Brown depth for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for now and an eventual replacement? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he might end up as depth. I really like Sidney Brown, but I'm sort of almost scarily similar to what Eric and Nick said in that I'm looking at my notes before the podcast I wrote down. Like, my concern with him is he a full-time player? So can he play split safety sort of every week? Do you even want him playing split safety a lot? Last year was really interesting because we saw him do lots of roles, and that's cool, but also it sort of proved the point that coverage in the slot is not his strength, and he's not going to end up in the slot, whereas I think Chauncey is much more like he could play nickel cornerback tomorrow, whereas I don't think Sidney Brown can. But what we also saw was Sidney Brown's run defense from the slot was like a cheat code. Like, the guy had some run fits that were just absolutely insane. I wrote he's a little bit over aggressive, so I think you mentioned the tackling stats. He's really inconsistent as a tackler. I think fans' perception of him, maybe casual fans, is that he's a really strong tackler because he hits really big and flies around the field. And yes, that's true. But at the end of the day, he missed too many as well. But I do think in general, like instinctively, he's a really, really good run defender. Like I said, like quite simply, I put in the bottom of my notes for my film review that I'm going to release over the next few weeks, is he looks like an athlete who deserves to be on the field in one way or another. Now, I don't really care how you do that. I actually really like the idea of playing him as like a dime linebacker type idea that Eric mentioned. I think you just get him there somewhere. It may be matchup specific. It may be it may be like it depends on who you're playing against. It may be you have a certain role you want for certain opponents. When Nick said that he really likes Reed Blankenship, I realised we really were similar about everything, because I'm also a huge Blankenship fan. So I don't expect him to start this year. Like, I don't think he's going to be better than Blankenship as an every down safety. He's not going to be better than Chauncey as an every down safety. I think they're a little bit different, although they're similar body types. Sidney Brown is much more of a hybrid linebacker box safety, whereas Chauncey is much more of a safety who can cover over the slot and gives you more versatility that way. So I think Sidney Brown can just be a little bit of everything. I wish I saw him a little bit more at deep safety last year. Like, I think he's got a little bit of range to play single high that we didn't really get to see a lot of. I'd just like to have seen him play some more generic sort of split safety stuff, see him play a little bit of tricks coverage that we've seen Blankenship play the past few years, because I don't really know if he can do that yet. And as everyone knows, in Fangio's defense, that is obviously a huge part of it. But one thing he does have is he's obviously quick enough to get downhill in run defense. And we know that if there's been a killer of Fangio-style coaches around the league of late, it's been the inability for safeties to get downhill quickly. And basically, you look at the Chargers and what they've done under Staley, it's just been run defense that's killed them. So it could be that Sidney Brown is the perfect safety for a modern Fangio defense because of how relentless he is and how quick he is at getting downhill. So I think the future is very bright for Sidney Brown. I don't know if it will be this year. I think coming off the ACL, I think it may take time, but I think he's too good to not play. I think eventually he will find himself on the field one way or another. It may be 5 to 10 snaps one week, it may be 20 to 25 snaps another week, but I think he'll be a valuable asset this year. So I'm excited to see how his role develops. It may not be as a full-time player, and it may not even be that much this year coming off the ACL. But as I said, I'll summarize what I said earlier on. I think he's someone who deserves to be on the field one way or another, and I think it'd be pretty cool to see how that actually happens next year.
All right. Does anybody have anything else they want to throw out about Sidney Brown?
I'll add in this about his tackling. I know a lot of people, we have talked about he does miss a good amount of tackles. Just for, to give people a little hope that he can improve that. Jesse Bates was also a very similar player in that he missed a lot of tackles early in his career and coming out of college, very similar to Sidney Brown. And then he turned it around. So listen, these are, like we're talking about here, these guys are all rookies. Their books are not written yet. This is just the first chapter, and all these guys can improve. We just need to see that happen now.